This is the CBS Evening News. Bob Schieffer sitting in tonight for Dan Rather. Good evening. We are beginning our broadcast tonight with an exclusive report that dramatically illustrates the changing face of Eastern Europe, the area along the Iron Curtain that separated East and West for more than 40 years. When Hungary tore down the fence along its border with Austria last spring, it proved more than just a sign that relations were becoming more relaxed. It was also a signal for thousands of East Germans to make their break for the West. They come into Budapest, Hungary by train, plane, and car. Some try to immigrate legally, others just head for the border. Well, tonight, Anthony Mason has the extraordinary story of how one group got out. And here is his report.
Ines Hartmann could not disguise her fear as she hid in a Hungarian sunflower field just a few hundred yards from the Austrian border. Then, heart-pounding, the 25-year-old East German made her break. She and 3 friends began their dash for freedom. Up ahead, the doorstep to the west, forbidden territory for East Germans. Nearby, armed Hungarian border guards. Ines had been caught once already and turned back. It is happening every day now. In the fields and villages just inside Hungary, hundreds of East Germans are running for the break in the Iron Curtain. Until a few months ago, they would have been stopped by an electrified fence. But in May, Hungary began cutting down the barbed wire, becoming the first East Bloc country with an open border. Hungary is one of the few places East Germans can visit, and they're flocking to Budapest, to the West German embassy, asking for assistance, hoping for asylum. The embassy has taken in so many refugees that this weekend it was forced to shut its doors. So the East Germans wait outside.
We sleep here in a bus car.
Last Friday, Ines Hartmann and her friends waited for hours for an appointment. West German officials told them to come back in 10 days. For everyone now, the choice is risking escape or returning to East Germany. This man was caught fleeing twice. But I can't go back, he says, or I'll have 10 years of jail waiting for me. The East German refugees are becoming a measure of Hungary's determination to break with old-style communism. Caught between sympathy for the refugees and loyalty to its allies, Hungary is finding sitting on the fence increasingly uncomfortable. Hungarian border guards rarely imprison the refugees, but they've been told the more East Germans they catch, the more days off they'll get. The guards in the border town of Zira earned their bonus points on Saturday. They've caught 7 today?
Yes.
And they're looking for 2 more?
Yes.
An abandoned car had been found on the edge of a field. It's a woman with a 6-year-old child, the guard says. The villagers told us they saw them heading for the border. Search dogs were sent after the mother and child, but we were ordered to stop filming. It is not good for Hungary, the commander said. Just a few miles away, the guards had made another catch. The East Germans, who like to punish families by breaking them apart, allowed Johann Eichler's parents to emigrate, but ordered he and his sister to stay behind.
We don't return to East Germany, never. We stay here in Hungary till the politics will be changed that we can go to West Germany.
Johann will try again. He wants to escape now because he fears East Germany may soon stop its people from traveling to Hungary.
Because it's our last chance.
This is the Austrian border. From here, it's less than 50 miles to Vienna. The East Germans, lucky enough to make it across, know they won't be prosecuted. And more importantly, they won't be sent back. Just before 6 o'clock last night, Ines Hartmann was within sight of the border. With the guard tower unmanned, she ran the last few yards slowly, this time slipping past the striped border marker without confrontation. 28 years to the day that the Berlin Wall was built by the East, Ines Hartmann of Dresden crossed into the West. Her friends all made it safely, too. They were given an unexpected welcome by Peter Kota, who himself escaped 7 years ago and now stood waiting for his nephew and a friend to finally join him. Peter! Soon, they appeared on the horizon as well. Within minutes Sunday afternoon, 6 young East Germans crossed into the West. and shared their triumph on an isolated farm road. They weren't thinking about what would happen next. It didn't seem to matter. First, said Inez Hartman, I just want to be free. Anthony Mason, CBS News, on the Austrian border.
The Prime Minister of Poland today gave up his attempt to form a communist-led government. Prime Minister Kiszczak says he'll let the head of the small United Peasants Party try to form a government now. The Peasants Party has been allied with the communists, but now is seeking a more independent role, possibly even an alliance with Solidarity. It would also include some communists. And still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, reports on 2 American congressmen killed in plane crashes. Gary Reeves on a new start for Gary Dotson, who's always claimed he was falsely accused. And David Browning on new life for old rockers. And we don't mean the chair kind. We're at half-staff in Washington today in memory of Texas Congressman Mickey Leland and 15 others who died with him in a plane crash in Ethiopia. Leland's group was en route to an Ethiopian refugee camp when its plane disappeared last Monday. Among the many Washington tributes to Leland today was this one on Capitol Hill by the Black Caucus.
Questions seem to haunt you night and day.
In Ethiopia, meanwhile, efforts are underway to recover the bodies and determine the cause of the crash. CBS newsman Peter Schweitzer has that part of the story now.
Bad weather prevented the recovery mission from getting underway this morning, but by this afternoon, the Air Force was working at full speed. Helicopters reached the spot where Congressman Mickey Leland's plane slammed straight into a mountainside in remote, rugged terrain 210 miles southwest of Addis Ababa. Rescue workers and supplies were lowered to the ground, a treacherous, slippery cliff. Today, they were preparing the site. Tomorrow, they will begin recovering the bodies. 12 have been found so far. 16 were believed to be on the plane. The victims will be hoisted to the choppers and brought to a newly established base camp 22 miles away. General Jim Record from Central Command in Florida arrived to inspect the operation. He gave a status report on the plans to remove the bodies.
If everything's ideal, we would like to have everybody back tomorrow evening.
The general defended the military's rescue effort.
Some people will criticize that we brought too much in. Other people will criticize that we brought too little in. Other people will criticize that you didn't bring the right stuff in.
One bright note in the course of this tragedy has been the unprecedented cooperation between the U.S. and Ethiopia, 2 governments that haven't always been the best of friends.
This morning, President Mengistu received the congressman who had come to find Mickey Leland. In the past, the U.S. has slammed the Marxist leader for violations of human rights, for famine relief abuse, for refusing to settle the civil war with the North. Today, they were thanking him for his help. This may be a turning point.
At this point, it's been superb. We could not have done what we needed to do over here without the Ethiopian support.
And while the Air Force was hard at work in the air, they were hard at work on the ground, expressing the latest U.S. point of view with a story guaranteed to win the hearts and minds of everyone. Last night, 2 U.S. chopper crews were caught in a storm and forced to land.
Anyhow, we were looking for a place to go. It was getting very dicey for us. We didn't want to end up in a bad situation. And we saw a little town with some lights. To be honest with you, had a lot of apprehension about exactly how were we going to handle this. As far as the security standpoint, were the natives friendly?
They were mobbed by a happy village.
They were really very friendly. They're, everybody wanted to come over and shake my hand and give me a big hug. And
the whole city council came out and sat down, and we sat around the fire and talked for a couple of hours about Ethiopia and Americans. And
when we first found out that we were going to come here, we thought to ourselves, oh, desert and starving people and disease. And then we got here and to find out it's really a lush, beautiful country with lots of hills and mountains.
Congressman Mickey Leland had been to Ethiopia 6 times. He loved this country. He would have loved the airman's story. Peter Schweitzer, CBS News, Addis Ababa.
And on top of all that, Washington was stunned today by word that another congressman died overnight in a small plane crash in this country. Freshman Republican Congressman Larkin Smith of Mississippi was killed when his plane went down in the Mississippi woods. Bruce Hall has our report on that.
The body of Congressman Larkin Smith was recovered from deep in the DeSoto National Forest in southern Mississippi this afternoon. His single-engine plane went down in a heavily wooded area late last night, about 25 miles south of Hattiesburg. It took authorities nearly 12 hours to find the wreckage.
And it appeared to just have more or less just disintegrated on impact.
Several residents said they heard the plane crash, but were not able to find the wreckage in the dense underbrush at night. Authorities believe the plane may have had mechanical problems.
This has been a very, very sad week for the House of Representatives and the Congress.
I guess what we have is an example that two members lost their lives while they were trying to provide good representation.
Larkin Smith represented this Mississippi Gulf Coast area. He was a conservative Republican, known for his law and order stands.
How you doing?
Smith had only been in Congress for 8 months, but Southern Republicans said he was quickly learning the ropes, and they expected a bright future.
Doing an outstanding job. He was already involved there in drug issues, Coast Guard funding, and I was just real proud of the job he was doing, and I'm going to personally miss him very much.
The congressman was using the small single-engine plane as a means of getting around his sprawling district, saying he needed it to quickly move from event to event. Friends said his frequent visits were helping his budding career.
In the short period of time that he had been there, he had made a real impact in Congress, which is tough for a freshman to do.
Investigators say they will need several weeks before they can say for certain the crash was caused by mechanical problems. Bruce Hall, CBS News, Janus, Mississippi.
The political situation in South Africa was thrown into chaos today. With elections less than a month away now, the longtime president was pressured to quit in a bitter dispute with a man who will take his place. Richard Wagner has our report.
After months of brutal infighting, President P.W. Botha was forced from office today in a dramatic cabinet coup. It was a rainy, gloomy day in Cape Town as the man who was head of state here for 11 years was made to step down. In an address to the nation, Botha said he was being ignored by ministers serving in his cabinet and thus had no choice other than resignation. The trigger was the announcement late last week that Botha's successor, F.W. de Klerk, would meet Zambian President Kenneth Kaunda. Kaunda has given refuge to South Africa's greatest enemy, the African National Congress, which has vowed to overthrow the apartheid regime. We believe his decision to retire is in South Africa's best interest. Although never perceived here as any kind of liberal, de Klerk has recently tried to soften his image. South Africa's new leader will be sworn in as interim president in the morning. Tonight, his political enemies went after de Klerk.
Mr. Botha has performed all sorts of reforms, and now we have Mr. de Klerk actually stabbing him in the back to get rid of him so that he can do God knows what with South Africa.
De Klerk, who is obviously going to be successor, in no way shows a new direction that allows for any real hope.
F.W. de Klerk has no easy task ahead of him. With the presidential election upcoming in 3 weeks, the opposition will take the stance that after 40 years in power, the National Party has lost its way, that it's time for a change. At this moment, the ruling party is facing a serious campaign of defiance from the anti-apartheid mass democratic movement. In addition to that, de Klerk and his associates are faced with convincing a skeptical international community that they have far-seeing policies for South Africa, policies which will forever bury the concept of apartheid. Richard Wagner, CBS News, Johannesburg.
In another sign of Iran's bitter power struggle, spiritual leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said today that there can be no direct hostage talks with the United States. Only last night, the government's news agency said that Iran would help free the hostages if the United States releases frozen Iranian assets. Iranian President Rafsanjani had made the same offer. In Lebanon, Syrian troops are believed massing for another assault on a key hilltop near Beirut, which is now being held by Christian Lebanese army soldiers. A major Syrian attack yesterday failed with heavy casualties. The U.S. State Department criticized Syria today for escalating the violence. Thousands of Roman Catholics marched in Londonderry tonight to protest the 20-year presence of British Army troops in Northern Ireland. They paraded through the part of town where the first troops were deployed in 1969 after bloody riots. Earlier today, there were violent protests in Belfast, but no injuries were reported. To provide almost $900 million in disaster relief for the nation's farmers. The biggest share, about $400 million, will go to wheat farmers in the Midwest whose winter crops were devastated by drought. The president also nominated his longtime aide Richard Breeden today to be the new chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Among other things, Breeden was a key player in drafting the terms of the savings and loan bailout legislation. For over 10 years, the strange case of convicted rapist Gary Dodson attracted national attention. Well, today, the story took yet another dramatic turn. Gary Reeves reports.
A decade-long legal fight ended for Gary Dotson today. The man who spent 6 years in prison for rape was finally cleared a full 4 years after his alleged victim admitted she fabricated the entire story.
It means for a change, we can hold our head up and not feel persecuted as we have in the past.
We do not think we would have been able to convince 12 people of his guilt had there been a retrial.
In 1985, Dotson's accuser, Kathleen Crowell-Webb, said she'd invented a rape that never happened. Her recantation put the odd pair on magazine covers and talk shows.
I think he served 6 years too long.
You were not his victim.
No.
He was your victim.
That's correct.
Webb's new story forced Governor James Thompson to hold a special clemency hearing. He let Dotson out on parole, but under a cloud of doubt.
I do not believe the recantation story of Kathy Crowell-Webb.
Since then, Dotson has struggled to clear his name through a bout with alcoholism and an arrest for assaulting his wife. But in the rape case, all the charges were dropped today when prosecutors decided not to contest new lab tests on Webb's clothing indicating Dotson had not raped her.
An innocent man was convicted of a crime that never even occurred.
I don't feel like I've got somebody to answer to anymore for the first time in 12 years.
Dotson has been living on parole in a halfway house for alcoholics. He says he will go back there as he tries to make a new start. Gary Reeves, CBS News, Chicago.
In New Mexico, bears have been turning up in populated areas seeking food because of the dry spring and summer. And today, a black bear attracted a lot of notice when she came down from the mountains and padded along the streets of Albuquerque. The animal control people were expecting her because they'd found her cub yesterday. She was tranquilized and then captured today. Mother and cub will be released tomorrow, but outside of town.
Shut up the damn phone.
You are about to see the most important words in headache and pain relief.
20 years ago this week, on a muddy field in upstate New York, a gathering of 350,000 young people gave a name to a generation. The name was Woodstock. And if you believe that Woodstock is only a matter for nostalgia buffs these days, we'll just watch the next report. It comes from David Browning.
What's wrong with this picture? It's a fair question this summer of '89. If tie-dyed T-shirts, hippies, and music from the Woodstock era are ancient history, why have 100,000 young people jammed into New Jersey's Meadowlands? They are here to see the Grateful Dead, one of the bands that played Woodstock. The Dead are living proof that you don't have to be young to rock and roll.
If somebody's good at something, there's no reason they should stop doing it, you know? It's not as though there was some mandatory retirement age.
Matter of fact, you might call this the summer of the rock and roll geezer. The Doobie Brothers are together again on tour, minus a little hair plus a few pounds. Ringo Starr, 49, has hit the road with an all-star band. Paul McCartney, 47, is doing the same. Roger Daltrey, 45, and The Who are packing them in. And the original middle-aged bad boys of rock, the Rolling Stones, are about to hit the States once more.
To the best live rock and roll band in the world.
Talk about ironies. 20 years ago, the Jefferson Airplane liked to joke that if they ever hit middle age, they'd call themselves the Jefferson Wheelchair. Now, they're gearing up to tour.
What's that old line about, if I'd have known I was going to last this long, I would have taken better care of myself? I know quite a few rock and roll stars that I think would agree with that saying now.
And And it's not just aging yuppies who turn out for the Who and the rest. There are kids standing online to see musicians old enough to be their fathers.
My generation. They're part of rock and roll history, is what I can say.
Mackenzie Phillips ought to know. Her Papa John is a rocker who still tours, who's amazed how kids of the 80s have picked up on old rock and roll from their mamas and papas.
It's like a form of musical child abuse or something, you know? I mean, their parents keep playing the records over and over again.
And so do classic rock stations, the hot radio format around the country these days.
This is 95.5 KLOS, some Beatles right there.
Advertisers love it because of all those affluent 30 and 40-something listeners.
And we're giving away the last Who tickets in town.
All aboard! Oh, this is nice.
But for bands like the Rolling Stones, hitting the road one more time involves more than just satisfaction. By one estimate, this year's tours by the Stones, the Who, and Paul McCartney could rake in a total of $300 million in tickets, TV rights, and T-shirts.
$35, sir. Special order.
The Stones were even asked the impertinent question, are you doing it just for the money?
No, that's the Who. Who said that? Who said that?
One thing is for sure, in their 40s, even rock and rollers can't live it up the way they did 25 years ago. Ringo has quit drinking.
I was in a mess, and I sought help, and I got it, and I feel a lot better for it. I'm just sorry.
Welcome back, man.
Thank you. I'm just sorry I waited so long, really.
And Peter Townsend of The Who is trying to be nicer to his ears, which are shot from too many decibels over the years.
So I've decided that I'm going to play a different style of guitar. I'm going to play a bit like John Denver.
It was Townsend who wrote 24 years ago the famous rock lyric, "Hope I die before I get old." On tour this summer, he and the others can be forgiven for thinking, "Hope I don't sprain anything before the concert's over." David Browning, CBS News, New York.
That's the news. I'm Bob Schieffer, sitting in tonight for Dan Rather. Good night.
I recall your dark face when it crackled like a thundercloud. Oh, tell me this town ain't got no heart. Tell me this town ain't got no heart. Oh, tell me this town ain't got no heart. Tell me this town ain't got no heart. Oh, tell me this town ain't got no heart. Tell me this town ain't got no heart. I can hear it beat out loud.
This is CBS.